All right, here's our next book. This one is called Make Way for Ducklings. It's by Robert McCloskey. And if you notice here, it has this special medal on it. It's called the Caldecott medal. And whenever you see a silver or gold medal on a book like that, it's meant to let you know that this is a really good book and lots of people have really enjoyed this book especially. If we look on the back, we get a little summary or taste. It says, the busy Boston streets are too dangerous for 8 little ducklings. But with a little help from a friendly policeman, Mrs. Mallard and her family arrived safely at their new home. The public garden was no place for the ducklings when they were first born, but now they're old enough to brave the raucous crowds and swim with the giant swan boats. Available for the first time in a full-size paperback edition, this Caldecott Medal winning classic continues to delight generations of children. All right, make way for ducklings. Oh, this is fun. This is something cool that the illustrator did. We see the development of this duckling emerging from its egg. That was sweet. I enjoyed that. Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey. Let's see, when was this book first published? This book has also been around for a while. It was first published in 1941 for the very first time. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live. But every time Mr. Mallard saw what looked like a nice place, Mrs. Mallard said it was no good. There were sure to be foxes in the woods or turtles in the water, and she was not going to raise a family where there might be foxes or turtles. So they flew on and on. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard are working hard to find a good place to be their home. Good, safe place. When they got to Boston, they felt too tired to fly any further. There was a nice pond in the public garden with a little island on it. The very place to spend the night, quacked Mr. Mallard. So down they flapped. Bet they're tired from all that flying and searching for a good home. That looks like a lovely park. I'd like to go there. Next morning they fished for their breakfast in the mud at the bottom of the pond, but they didn't find much. Have you ever seen a duck do that? That's pretty cool. That's not how I swim, though. Just as they were getting ready to start on their way, a strange, enormous bird came by. It was pushing a boat full of people, and there was a man sitting on its back. "Good morning," quacked Mr. Mallard, being polite. The big bird was too proud to answer, but the people on the boat threw peanuts into the water, so the Mallards followed them all round the pond and got another breakfast, better than the first. Would you like to see the big duck? That's not a duck at all. It's a boat. And if you'll notice here, it has the shape of a swan for the boat driver or conductor to steer the boat. So I think they were confused when they thought this was a big duck. It wasn't even a duck at all. No wonder it didn't acknowledge them. Let's keep reading. I like this place, said Mrs. Mallard as they climbed out on the bank and waddled along. Why don't we build a nest and raise our ducklings right in this pond? There are no foxes and no turtles, and the people feed us peanuts. What could be better? Good, said Mr. Mallard, delighted that at last Mrs. Mallard had found a place that suited her. But, oh my, they're pleased with this place. That must be them talking. If you notice right here, says but, and then it has a hyphen, which lets us know that more is coming. Look out! Squawked Mrs. Mallard, all of a dither. You'll get run over. And when she got her breath, she added, This is no place for babies. With all those horrid things rushing about, we'll have to look somewhere else. What horrid things are rushing about? Bicycles. Oh, look how afraid Mr. and Mrs. Mallard look. So they flew over Beacon Hill and round the State House, but there was no place there. Look how big that building is. On and on. They looked at Louisburg Square, but there was no water to swim in. It looks nice, but no water to swim in. Then they flew over the Charles River. This is better, quacked Mr. Mallard. That island looks like a nice, quiet place, and it's only a little way from the public garden. Yes, said Mrs. Mallard, remembering the peanuts. That looks like just the right place to hatch ducklings. I think they really liked that island in the park. They liked those peanuts. So they chose a cozy spot among the bushes near the water and settled down to build their nest. And only just in time, for now they were beginning to molt. All their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new ones grew in. Let's reread that because I heard a fun, interesting new word. Let's see. It says, so they chose a cozy spot among the bushes near the water and settled down to build their nest. And only just in time, for now they were beginning to molt. I wonder, do you know what it means for a duck to molt? If we reread and read maybe the sentences around it, it will give us more information about that fun new word, and maybe it will help us to better understand what it means to molt and why it's important in this story that right now they are molting. It says, all their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new ones grew in. So now we know both what the word molt means. It means all their old wing feathers started to drop out. And now we also know why it's important in this story for the author to tell us that they were molting. It says, they would not be able to fly again until the new ones grew in. So they found a home just in time. But of course they could swim. And one day they swam over to the park, onto the riverbank, and there they met a policeman called Michael. Michael fed them peanuts, and after that the mallards called on Michael every day. Here's Michael. He looks like a very friendly policeman. Look at that. Looks like he gave him a snack. It says Michael fed them peanuts. And after that, the mallards called on Michael every day. That means they went to go see him. After Mrs. Mallard had laid 8 eggs in the nest, she couldn't go to visit Michael any more because she had to sit on the eggs to keep them warm. She moved off the nest only to get a drink of water, or to have her lunch, or to count the eggs and make sure they were all there. She cared very much about those eggs. Had to protect them. And here, oh, other side. Here, I bet that's Mr. Mallard. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard taking care of those babies. One day, the ducklings hatched out. First came Jack, then Cack, then Lack, then Mack, and Knack, and Ooack, and Pack, and Quack. Can you imagine a duck named Quack? How funny. I'm going to reread those names. I want you to notice, do these words have the same beginning sound or the same ending sound? Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Ooack, Pack, Quack. In each word, the beginning sound changes, but we keep the same ending sound. When you have the same ending sound for each word, that's a rhyming word. Lots of rhyming in their names. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were bursting with pride. It was a great responsibility, taking care of so many ducklings, and it kept them very busy. They had a lot of ducklings, but they were so happy. They thought it was wonderful that they got the opportunity to take care of so many wonderful little ducklings. But it sure was hard work. One day, Mr. Mallard decided he'd like to take a trip to see what the rest of the river was like further on. So off he set. "I'll meet you in a week in the public garden," he quacked over his shoulder. "Take good care of the ducklings." "Don't you worry," said Mrs. Mallard. "I know all about bringing up children." And she did. She taught them how to swim and dive. I just love these illustrations. I think they're so well done. Doesn't have a lot of color, but I just think they look so nice even without color. She taught them to walk in a line, to come when they were called, and to keep a safe distance from bikes and scooters and other things with wheels. I wonder if your mom and dad teach you to come when you're called and to be safe and keep a safe distance from dangerous things, and if maybe your teacher teaches you to walk in a straight line. When at last she felt perfectly satisfied with them, she said one morning, "Come along, children, follow me." Before you could wink an eyelash, Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack fell into line just as they had been taught. Mrs. Mallard led the way into the water, and they swam behind her to the opposite bank. Ooh! I wonder where they're going. Did it tell us? I don't think it told us, but I can predict where they're going. Maybe a place where they've been before, or at least a place where Mrs. Mallard has been before. I wonder why it was important to her that the ducklings know to get in a line when she asked for them to, and to follow her and stay with her and to be safe. There they waded ashore and waddled along till they came to the highway. Ooh. What do you have to do when you walk up to a highway? I wonder what she will have them do. They've never seen a highway before. Mrs. Mallard stepped out to cross the road. Honk, honk, went the horns on the speeding cars. Quack, went Mrs. Mallard as she tumbled back again. Quack, quack, went Jack, cack, lack, mack, knack, whack, pack, and quack, just as loud as their little quackers could quack. The cars kept speeding by and honking, and Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings kept right on quack, quack, quacking. Oh my! There's Mrs. Mallard. Quack, quack, quack. And then you can see all the little ducklings doing the same quack, quack, quack. And then the busy, fast cars honk, honk, honk. I wonder how they'll be able to cross the street with all these busy, powerful cars passing by, racing by. They made such a noise that Michael came running, waving his arms and blowing his whistle. Michael's here to save the day. Look at that. Blowing his whistle. Tweet. There the cars honking. Honk. And then the ducks quacking. Quack, quack, quack. He planted himself in the center of the road, raised one hand to stop the traffic, and then beckoned with the other, the way policemen do for Mrs. Mallard to cross over. There he held one hand to stop the traffic and beckoned with the other. That means he called them to him, the way policemen do to stop traffic. Oh, thank goodness for Michael. As soon as Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings were safe on the other side and on their way down Mount Vernon Street, Michael rushed back to his police booth. He went back to where he was supposed to be. He left his police booth to help them out. And now he's rushing back, now that they are safe. Oh, and if you look really close, you can see Mrs. Mallard and the little ducklings who have safely crossed the street. He called Clancy at headquarters and said, "There's a family of ducks walking down the street," Clancy said. "Family of what? Ducks?" yelled Michael. "Send a police car, quick." A police car for a family of ducks? Oh my goodness. A whole police car just to help out a family of ducks. And maybe it's to keep the drivers safe too, because that could cause a wreck if they're distracted and worried about the ducks. Meanwhile, Mrs. Mallard had reached the corner bookshop and turned into Charles Street with Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack all marching in line behind her. And here we have a gentleman peering out of the bookshop to see all the ducklings. Everyone stared. An old lady from Beacon Hill said, "Isn't it amazing?" And the man who swept the street said, "Well, now, ain't that nice?" And when Mrs. Mallard heard them, she was so proud she tipped her nose in the air and walked along with an extra swing in her waddle. She was so proud of her children. She loved when people would compliment her, like other mamas. They love it when their babies get complimented. When they came to the corner of Beacon Street, there was the police car with 4 policemen that Clancy had sent from headquarters. The policemen held back the traffic so Mrs. Mallard and the Ducklings could march across the street. 4 policemen holding up traffic for the Ducklings. And there are the Ducklings crossing the busy, busy street. Right on into the public garden. Their new home. That place that Mrs. Mallard really liked before. Inside the gate, they all turned round to say thank you to the policemen. The policemen smiled and waved goodbye. I think they were very happy to help them. When they reached the pond and swam across to the little island, there was Mr. Mallard waiting for them just as he had promised. I guess that's where Mr. Mallard was, waiting for them on the island. There he is on the rock. And Mrs. Mallard and the little ducklings are headed to meet him for their new home. The ducklings liked the new island so much that they decided to live there. All day long they follow the swan boats and eat peanuts. Swan boat? There it is. And the little spits are Mr. and Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings, following the swan boat while they eat those yummy, yummy peanuts. And when night falls, they swim to their little island and go to sleep. Oh, there's more shadowing on this picture. I think that's meant to show us that even though it's in browns and grays and black and white, that it is nighttime. There they are, headed to go home and go to sleep. The end. It gives us a little bit of information about the author on this back page. I'll read it to you. Robert McCloskey, who was born in 1914 and died in 2003, created some of the most honored and enduring children's books ever published. That means lots of people really appreciated them and respected what he'd done with those works. And they've lasted a long time. Remember, I told you that it was published quite a while back. He was born in Hamilton, Ohio, the town that served as the model for Lentil, the first of many books that he wrote and or illustrated for children. His second book, Make Way for Ducklings, so this was the second book he wrote and published, received the Caldecott Award, as did his Time of Wonder, making him the first person to be so honored twice. So he was the first person to be honored with the Caldecott Medal twice. In Boston, statues of Robert McCloskey's ducklings are a popular attraction for children and adults alike. That was Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey.